process. You couldn't legally now make that vodka part, that grain neutral spirit part. That was outlawed in England. So there was a problem. If you had nothing to infuse your berries into, what could you do? Well, the answer lay north of the border. Scotland and England have different legal systems, very different legal systems. And so that law did not apply in Scotland. So the distillers making single malt scotch in southern Scotland turned to making neutral spirit. And they sold it south of the border so that the English gin makers could rectify it into gin. So they got round the process. They got round the process by doing it that way. It all fell apart at the end of the 18th century. Britain went to war with Napoleon, and it became unpatriotic to drink French brandies, French wines, cognacs. Much better you drinking English ales, Scotch whiskey, Irish whiskey, go on, whatever. Gin. And gin came in from the cold. It was rehabilitated by the end of the 18th century. And the gin that came back was slightly different than the gin that had gone out. This time, to make it palatable, they didn't use turpentine. They used sugars, spices, flavours, syrups to make it tasty. And they made it cheap, and they created gin palaces across London. People think of London as being a place where you go down the road for the pub, mate. Pubs didn't exist in 1800 London. That wasn't existed. A pub was in someone's front room. But gin palaces existed. They were like a flame to the moth. They were gilded and golden, and they had dancing girls and they had chandeliers, and the poorest of the poor in London were dragged in. And for a handful of pennies, you could have your gin and drink it to your heart's content. The gin palace was born. However, you might have even been too poor for the gin palace. So you'd walk down some dark street in the East End of London, Bethnal Green, Whitechapel, somewhere like that, real Jack the Ripper country. To be fair, Londoners are always jolly when they walk. They're always singing. You go down Lambeth, why any evening. Anyway, we'll leave it at that. So you go down this darkened alley in the East End of London, and you would come across a doorway, and above the doorway was the carved black cat's head, a wooden black cat's head above the doorway. You were like, You knew this was the place. And beside the door were two slots, a round slot and a narrow slot. Into the narrow slot you placed your penny, your halfpenny, your farthing, whatever it was you could afford. Then out of the round hole came a hosepipe. And out of your jacket came a flagon. And whatever you'd paid, that was how much you got. And way off down the road you went, drinking your gin. Because it was because of the black cat's head, they called it Old Tom Gin, from the Old Tom Cat's head. So if I was to transport you back to 1800s London, that is the gin you would have drunk, an Old Tom Gin. And it was also the Old Tom Gin was the first gins to come to America. They were the gin of choice in Philadelphia, Boston, New York, back in the early 1800s. The very first cocktails that were ever made, which is an American invention, would have been made out of Old Tom gins. But in the UK, Old Toms came to an end really abruptly in 1830. An invention by an Irishman with a very unfortunate name. His name was Anus. And he has been the butt of many jokes. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of these folks. Yeah, it gets better. His name was Anus Coffee. Yeah, where's your Book of Mormon now? And Anus Coffee, which I would not advise you get at Starbucks, invented the column still. That big tall still that was unlike the onion-shaped pot stills. And in doing so, he revolutionised spirit making. Up until that, so if you go to Scotch whisky distillery today, they use the pot still, they fire it up, And the spirit that comes off the still is around about 70% alcohol by volume. Now, if that was the vodka industry, the other 30% they would call impurities. The Scotch industry would call it flavour. Vodka isn't interested in flavour. It's there to get you messed up. So the column still took you to 96.6% alcohol by volume. Pure ethanol. And that meant it was a purity element. Technically, they do not distill on the lees. What I mean by that is they do not use dead yeast cells in the distillation process, which the Scotch whisky industry does. So it's a different way of doing this. And if you take that spirit and you put it in an oak cask for 3 years, you get what's called grain whisky. You take grain whisky and you mix it with single malt scotches together as blended whisky. That's Johnny Walker, that's Dewar's, that's Chivas Regal. That's Johnny Walker is a mixture of 35 whiskies from 35 different distilleries going to make a Johnny Walker. But that is not what we were looking for. Grain neutral spirit straight off the still. There is a problem. It's virtually unpalatable. So you add your botanicals, and principally you added juniper. Juniper berries are not berries. They're modified pine cones. They're pine cones. Juniper is a member of the cypress family of trees. Juniper grows in every continent on Earth except Antarctica. It's one of the most successful trees of all. There are more than 50 species of juniper on Earth, of which 3/4 are poisonous. The common juniper grows everywhere, and that's that beautiful blue berry. Why does it look like a berry? It evolved at the same time as birds. Birds like berries. And so the pine, the scales of the pine cone fattened out and became fleshy, turned blue and round. So it mimicked a berry. So the birds would pick it up, one point, what the hell is that? And so propagate the species. That is why when you think of gin, we think Christmas trees. We think pine needles. Or somebody said to me, pine needles and hedge clippings. It's like Tanqueray man there, eh? So that's why you get the pininess in a traditional gin. And in England, by law, you elevate the pininess from the juniper. That style of gin is called a London Dry. London Dries do not need to be made in London. There are London Dries made in New York. It's a style of gin. There's only one gin that has geographical provenance, and that is Plymouth Dry. Plymouth Dries have to be made within the city walls of the city of Plymouth in the southwest of England. The word dry is not the opposite of wet. It's an old term meaning not sweet. We think of like dry vermouths, dry martinis, this kind of thing. And that is because the old Tom gin was sweet and this wasn't. Sweet, dry, London Dry. Because the big companies, Tanqueray, Beefeater, they emerged at this time in the 1830s, and London was producing the vast majority of this new style, this clean, juniper heavy gin that revolutionized what gin would be. And for the next 150 years, that is the gin that would rule the world. The London Dry gin. Nobody goes into a bar and goes, Tanqueray in the rocks, mate. Glug. Because it's not meant to be drunk straight. But we're going to, at the end, a little bit of show and tell you all about a bedfellow, a very unusual and unexpected bedfellow that would make the London Dry go forward. In America, also in the 19th century, came along the notion of the cocktail. Here in New York, in 1860s, there was what became known as the great Tom Collins hoax. You go into a bar, and the bartender would say to you, after you've had your pint, he said, do you know Tom Collins? You go, no, I don't know who Tom Collins is. He knows you. And he has been bad-mouthing you all round town. The stuff he is telling about you. I think he went off to that other bar. Right! I'm off to get him. They were all, the bars were all owned by the same people. So it was a way of generating you, because you had to go in, and it was bad protocol not to buy a drink. So everybody was looking for Tom Collins. Even the newspapers got in on it. You could read in the New York Times where Tom Collins had been cited. But Philadelphia, Boston, Baltimore, Washington, they all got in on the act. There was no Tom Collins. Right about the same time in London, a man created a cocktail very similar to what you had. The simple syrup, the lemon juice, gin, and topped up with carbonated water. And he was John Collins. So the John Collins made it as a drink to New York in 1864, but because the name Tom Collins was so famous in New York, it became Tom Collins. And so the Tom Collins is really one of the oldest cocktails that we still drink in terms of the classic cocktails. The Tom Collins would of course morph into the French 75 in the First World War. Other drinks would come along like the Negroni, with the Count de Negroni in Italy, mixing gin with Campari. And you would have the Aviation, named after, of course, the Wright brothers and their flights, and the drink that would really take gin to the next level, which was the Martini. Martini finally got its name and its place round about 1920. There were proto-martinis before that, but the Martini we recognise comes in around about 1920. And that was really the vehicle that made gin the drink of choice throughout Prohibition America. The speakeasies, the Great Gatsby, that whole era was all martinis, and it was all gin martinis. When Ian Fleming wrote James Bond, when Ian Fleming wrote James Bond and rather bizarrely Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, yes, the man who wrote James Bond also wrote Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, his martinis, shaken or stirred, were gin martinis. He also invented another drink where you took gin, vodka and vermouth and mixed it together. That's a Vesper. Vesper, if you do it to Ian Fleming's recipe, then let's face it, the man was a raging alcoholic. 3 parts gin, 1 part vodka, and a half part Lillet or Cocky Americano. You have 2 of those, you will never drive for the MTA again. Just saying. But that is Ian Fleming's Vesper. Ian Fleming wrote that in the 1940s after the Second World War. By late 1950s, early 1960s, an assassin appeared in the drinks world. This assassin came in the night and said, whatever gin can do, I can also do. I am cheaper, and I have a special magic power. You can drink me, and your parents won't know you're drunk, because they won't be able to smell it on your breath. The fact you're bouncing off the wall is neither here nor there. It is, of course, vodka. It was also very sexy, that whole Russia with love, behind the Iron Curtain, all that Smirnoff and so on. And so vodka replaced gin as the drink of choice in the mixers. So by the time 007 is being played by Sir Sean Connery, absolutely, is that he's definitely not drinking a gin martini. It's a ridiculous notion. It's a vodka martini, shaken not stirred. However, the times they are changing. Through the 1960s and 70s, gin was at a very low ebb. In the mid-1980s, the umbilical cord was started to be broken. Bombay came along in the Bombay, you see the bottle, picture of Queen Victoria, says 1751. No, it was designed in London by an American in the 1960s. So Bombay was created in the 1960s, and in the 1980s they came out with Bombay Sapphire, that blue bottle. Dialed down the juniper, dialed up the other botanicals, and they created a gin that was slightly different from your London dries. 17 years ago, the umbilical cord was cut completely with the arrival of Hendrix. Hendrix dialed the juniper almost to non-existency and went cucumber and rose petals. And that is 17 years. It takes 10 years to be an overnight success. Ask Tito's. Tito's has been around for a long time, but they're only recently, like 1 million cases a year now, whatever they do. But Hendrix said, here's a brave new world. And all these new gins appeared. Some local, some here in New York, British gins and so on. In the UK, gin is on fire. In Spain, gin is on fire as well. And it is the vodka that is now disappearing from the menus. I got a liquor store on the Upper East Side, Ambassador Wines and Spirits. They now carry 108 different gins on their shelf. And most of the liquor stores I work with, if you take Tito's out of the equation, their gin section now outsells the vodka section. So people say to me, is Hendrick's your competitor? I'm like, no. Kettle One, Belvedere, Grey Goose. It's not the Tanquerays as well. I'm never going to compete with Tanquerays, 1 million cases a year. But I am going to compete with Grey Goose and Kettle One. And people who, if people say to me, oh, I drink Hendrick's, great, then you're on board. The rising tide lifts every ship. If you like Hendrick's, you're going to like me. Well, not me personally. My juice. So, you know, we're in a brave new world. And the next cocktail that we're going to make is the one that really turns that whole thing on its head. In the